Hey everyone, I've got the answer. Don't worry, I have the answer to the questions that I posed yesterday about when we see an EXE, can it be good or can it be bad, and what's the difference? But I found the answer. Welcome back to another episode of the Little Root Lab.
The Little Root Lab is a homegrown, self-learning journey into IT and cybersecurity, narrated by Simon Arnold. It is being built from the ground up, documenting progression through systems, networking, and SOC concepts as it develops, including the mistakes, the learning process, and the real-world growth that comes with it. It is hoped that viewers find value in the series and are able to take something useful from the journey as it unfolds. Enjoy.
So welcome back to the Little Root Lab, and today I'm going to be talking about threat hunting, which is brilliant actually. It's been one of those days. It's been really mundane on the external, and hopped on to do my work as we should do when we're learning cybersecurity, and it was anything but boring. And when people talk about logs and all these things, it's like there's not much going on quite a lot of the time. And I'm here to tell you, when there's not a lot going on most of the time, I actually really enjoy that as well. It's fantastic, really. So, subject of today is learning threat hunting starts with not knowing what you're looking at. Learning areas today, I understood a little bit more about what EXE is, and I'll go through that in a minute, and what the role of parent is. Parent ID, I think it is, but we get into it really. So I've been messing around with Windows logs and Sysmon yesterday, trying to learn threat hunting. And I started out thinking, it's going to be something very different from what it actually is. So I thought threat hunting was about identifying bad things, and that's where the EXE stuff, the question, came from yesterday. And obviously when you're in cybersecurity, it's kind of like, oh my god, everyone's being attacked all the time, But when you get down to it, there's so much more just looking at kind of healthy logs, really, which is pretty good. So instead of finding the malicious executable or spotting the virus or recognizing the attack tool, that kind of thing. At the beginning I was basically trying to classify everything as good or bad. I saw winword.exe, I thought, oh, that's suspicious. If I saw acrobat.exe, and I know that Acrobat hasn't got a good rap, has it? The same thing, right? And, if I saw svchost.exe, I wasn't sure. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I was tending to think that it was more definitely suspicious. And Explorer.exe, like that felt like the only safe one, So my entire approach today was basically trying to build a mental list of trusted and untrusted executables, which is completely reasonable. But that approach doesn't actually work because Windows doesn't behave like that, and attackers definitely don't either. So what I've started to realise is that threat hunting is not identifying bad executables. It's identifying abnormal behaviour in normal systems. And coming away from the script a little bit, I mean, it's great. It's the place I want to be. I love it. Why do I love it? I get back into it a little bit more because I can go off at a tangent and then come back. I try and keep it a bit more concise for all of you guys out there, really. It all made sense. Like, I could follow it all the way through. Like, I don't know, like, the fighting fantasy books that we used to read from Ian Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, and I've got like, oh, I've got the Citadel of Chaos here, right? That I used to read to my kids when they were smaller, and we'd spend like 4 hours doing it. It's kind of like that kind of thing, where each area you kind of, yeah, connect it all together. But when you look at something like Sysmon on the event ID 1, and I just want to, before I come on to the event ID 1, it was good to have a fresh install of Sysmon yesterday, even though it took like an hour and 20 minutes. I mean, listen to that podcast episode if you want to, it's good. But then when I was getting into the nitty gritty, it's getting into the nitty gritty really, where you just go to Microsoft. What is it in the active event viewer? That's it. And then you see something like Sysmon Event ID 1. So what you see is not chaos, it's patterns, right? And you see process creation events that follow very predictable structures. For example, explorer.exe, so, or cmd.exe. And if you've just started with your making up your lab, cmd is command, all right? Then you've got explorer.exe, PowerShell exe, services.exe, and svc host exe. And at first glance it looks like noise, but it's not actually. It's a story. It's Windows telling you exactly how things are supposed to happen. And there was a shift for me really. I started not to think in terms of individual processes being good or bad, but I started to think in terms of behavior chains. Oh man, it's kind of like I want to tell the whole world about it, and I guess I am really on this podcast. So instead of what is this exe, you start asking, well, why did this process start and what caused it to start like this? If you've got a lab at home and it's been air-gapped, so no access to the internet, and you've installed Sysmon with internet, and then you've connected up a small network, I guess, you're going to see a lot of 1s and 5s, and you're not going to see anything that is malicious. And that's the thing where I'm asking everyone who's at this stage just to keep going, because the penny does drop after a while. So if we look at something executable, it can mean different things depending on the context, all right? And that's what happens when you just go through the layers a little bit more. So take winword.exe. On its own, it's just Microsoft Word, okay? It's nothing special. But in a real system, Word might open a document, but that runs a macro, and that launches PowerShell, and that reaches out to the internet. And I still cannot remember the podcast that I've been listening to. Let me pause this podcast and for a second and look at what podcast I've been listening to, because it explains the PowerShell really, really well. 1 second. Okay, I've got it. I've had a look for you because it's been good. Jack Rysider, so Jack and then RHYSIDER, really good. If you want to know more about PowerShell, just listen to that stuff, because that's where a lot of the trouble can come from. So what I was saying is that, when something runs a macro, it launches PowerShell, it reaches out to the internet, and in that chain, Word is no longer just Word. Okay, it's the entry point, not because it's malicious by default, but because the behavior around it becomes meaningful. Now, when you listen, maybe this is going off point a little bit, but I'm sure you get what I'm on about. When I've listened to Late Night Linux, and I'm trying to bring it into what I mean here. And they're talking about sysadmin. There's so much you can do with the computers and to get them to do what you want. But when you look at a normal browser, from what I've understood, it's even more complex, and of course the browser is connected to the internet. That's what I wanted to say in a quite a light way, really. But if we look at another exe, so if we look at SVC host exe, which I came into contact with fairly early on within the first couple of months of learning about cybersecurity, you'll see it everywhere in logs, right? And that's the reason why I saw it fairly early on. And most of the time it's completely normal. It's Windows running services, but attackers know that too. So they abuse that trust, they mimic it, they inject into it, and they try to blend into it. It's the same name, it's the same idea, it's completely different behaviour depending on the context. And that's really the core idea in threat hunting. Nothing is inherently good or bad, everything is contextual. So when you look at the logs long enough, and believe me I have, you start to see that Windows has a baseline rhythm. A user logs in, processes start from Explorer, system services initialize in predictable ways. That's normal system behavior, you guys. And once you understand that baseline, you can start noticing when something breaks it, not because it looks scary, but because it doesn't fit the pattern. And if you ask ChatGPT, I asked ChatGPT to give me 300 questions on virus, worms, rootkit, malware, and all the other jazz. And I got it all right. And that's because I could determine, and believe me, you know, when I was asked, obviously, to log all the data like you do, normal documentation, you know, a lot of it, not a lot of it, maybe a third, would be log, that's normal behaviour, there you go, put it to bed. But other ones, I mean, if you've got a knack for this, and I do, it's gonna literally like being like standing out of a page if you're reading a book and you're reading all English words and then German comes in. I mean, you know, it's you know, it's, for me, it's seeing stuff like a sore thumb. I mean, it's like completely obvious, but maybe the attackers are so good that they try and make it not so obvious. So a system process launches something it normally wouldn't, right? If that were to happen, maybe a user application spawns PowerShell unexpectedly. Maybe a process runs from a strange location. On the command line, if that looks off, encoded, or overly complex, I mean, none of these things are automatically malicious on their own. You know, what's the word from that film? You know, we're all on a hair trigger, people. We're not necessarily all on a hair trigger in cybersecurity. You know, that's the very point of it all. It's you know, it's knowing with experience whether some things are automatically not malicious on their own, but they are deviations from normal behaviour, and that's what matters in this case. I mean, what I'm realising that threat hunting is basically learning what normal looks like so well that abnormal becomes obvious. Exactly what I've just said about ChatGPT. Give me tests on, you know, everything, what's going on. And if you're going to listen to Jack Resider, listen to WannaCry, because that's really, really good. I think is it Mike Hutchins in Cornwall that actually found that out? Fantastic story. Check it out. Check out Jack Resider, because it's brilliant. So you have to know, and I've spoken about this a lot, that when, you know, I started with the top 30 Windows commands and the top 30 Linux commands, and I said to everyone, suggested to everyone, learn them off by pat, and then you don't have to kind of look them up or, see what's all on about, really. But what I'm saying in this case is that you don't need to memorize a list of threats because you understand the structure of the system. Does that make sense? And that all comes with experience anyway. And right now, I'm at the very early stage of that. I'm not spotting attacks. I'm just learning what normal Windows behavior actually looks like, which processes spawn from where, which typical chains look like, what expected execution actually feels like, and that turns out to be the real foundation. Can you remember at the start of the podcast I was saying it's a pretty bland day at home, and then when I turn on Windows, actually the normal is really interesting for me. It's fantastic. It's fascinating because when you do look and see if you're a good fit for cybersecurity, there's going to be hours and hours and hours of just checking logs and the traffic that's going on. And sometimes you're going to go under durations where not much is really happening, and then you can, if something then kicks off, then you can up a gear really. But I'm just trying to say that if you're like me, the base layer is interesting, So, because when you understand normal behavior deeply enough, you don't really search for threats in the same way anymore. You notice them, and they stand out because they don't belong in the story the system is telling you. You basically see it like a sore thumb, and I think with so much talk about people in cybersecurity in burnout, and listening to Late Night Linux, actually there's a big spate of a certain code writers. It's not Ruby, it's another one, and they're just continuously burning out on there. It's just another angle on IT as a whole, but I can't explain it anymore. Try and identify if you have the tendency of going into burnout behavior, and maybe if any of you listening out there that do have solutions to burnout behavior in IT, then get in touch and we can have a chat and do a live podcast together. So we're recognizing when behavior doesn't match the system it's running in, and then it only works if you understand what normal looks like first. And I tell you what, normal isn't boring. There's a lot going on even when it's boring, and that's where I'm at right now. I'm not advanced. I'm not detecting anything fancy. I'm just learning the language of Windows logs and starting to recognize the patterns in it. That's it, and that's the beginning of threat hunting. Thanks very much, and I'll catch you very soon.